If you were my client and you were interested in getting a promotion in your tech PM role, this is exactly what I would tell you. First of all, we have to understand what the rubric for leveling looks like in your company. Depending if you're working for a big tech company or a smaller company or a startup or something in between, you can have a different understanding, internal company understanding of what levels even mean. I'm not necessarily talking about the titles. I'm just talking about the progression of what it means to go from a junior PM to a senior PM in your organization. Obviously, this leveling, this concept is well understood in big tech companies, Google, Facebook, Amazon. There's a progression. There's an internal rubric. L5 means this, L6 means that, and so on. So your first job is to figure out, what does the company even think about the leveling system? What do the different levels mean? You have to find the internal documents, if those exist. And if they don't, you can ask the team, leadership, your manager, where this information is in the company and whether it's even in a written format. A lot of companies, especially the smaller companies, will not have a distinction that you can understand for the levels inside the company. And that's okay. But step one is just understanding, what are we actually dealing with? I call this rubric. You need to understand the company rubric. How does the company think about level 4 versus level 5 versus level 6? How does the company think about that progression? Let's say you're in a big tech company and the rubric is pretty well understood. What you're usually going to find is an internal document that says, here is how Google, let's say, here's how we think about L5 product manager. Here are the skills they need to demonstrate. Here is the scope of work that need to demonstrate. And then maybe here is the specific experience or maybe actual deliverables that we need to show at this level. Each one is going to have subpoints, and this is exactly what we're going to work through in the rest of this video. But step one is just copy that over to your own personal document where you're going to create a spreadsheet that basically says, here are all the requirements. Column 1 is all the requirements for this table. Of course, nowadays, just copy it to your favorite LLM and have it create this checklist for you. Here are all the things, according to all the documentation that I can find internally. Here is what it means to be my level, L5, let's say, and here's what it means to be L+1, L6. Or if you don't have the level numbers, it might be, here's what it means to be a senior PM, and here's what it means to be a group PM or principal PM. And you want to visually be able to see what your level looks like, what L+1 looks like, and what your current performance looks like. And what we're going to be talking about here is creating a promo deck and a promo doc, a promo readiness document for yourself that you're going to be referencing in order to build the case for promotion, in order to sell the case for promotion to your manager and other folks that you need to get buy-in from. And then we're going to leverage that exact doc to actually go ahead and get promoted. First step, understand the rubric, understand what it takes, and understand where you currently are there. So you should write in for every single element your current state and how you can prove it. Let's say the scope of impact has to be cross-org, for instance, at the higher level. What does it mean to be cross-org? Multiple orgs have to be touched. Where are you currently? You're working in one org, so write that down. So there's a gap. There's a clear gap. We want to understand these gaps because when everything's said and done, we want to make the case that you are now operating under L+1, meaning you're doing all the things that the company says is required of the level above you, and you're executing on that now, and you are successful. And that's the best way that the company can know, great. If this person's already executing at L+1, then they are misleveled. So we just give them the promotion. It makes sense. But if you are not yet operating at that level, well, there could be a gap, because what if we give you a promotion and then you're not operating under that level? So just so you know how the frame is for how companies think about this. For instance, in Google, when we were doing these promo calibrations, we would actually just have the entire rubric up, and then we would say person A, person B, person C, how are they doing on this thing? How are they doing on that experience, on that skill set, on that deliverable? What do different people think? What do detractors or advocates say? And then we would actually stack rank the candidates, and then certain people, there would be a bar above which people get promoted and below which people don't get promoted. There's a bunch of other stuff we'll talk about that can influence your promotion chances, but for now, we're just focusing on the stuff that you can actually influence. So you've got your rubric written out at length. Now let's talk a little bit about what are the likely components of this rubric. Well, first, let's take the case of what happens if you work in a startup and it's not well understood. You don't have an internal guideline of what that rubric is. You're going to have to create one and then bring it to your manager for review and approval in order to make the case to go to L+1. But let's assume you've got the rubric. Now let's run through some common elements that you can usually see in these rubrics. So the first one is this concept of scope. Scope refers to the surface area of the things that you service or work on as a product manager. This could be as small as a sub feature or a feature, an element on the screen or an element in the product at some point in delivery, or it could be the whole product. So that's how scope changes from a company and product perspective. And scope you can also think of in terms of how many different people, organization, departments, groups of people are involved in actually delivering this thing. You might start out as working on just this one feature. You're going to add this button or change the way this functionality actually works. Well, you might interface with a couple of designers and maybe a couple of engineers. So your scope is a couple of designers, a couple of engineers, one org, one feature. You can imagine that as you continue growing in your product career, you might have entire product lines, a ton of revenue impact. You might have 50 engineers, you might have 20 design and sales and marketing and other folks, and you're working across multiple orgs, so therefore your scope obviously increases. The second thing is the skills section. This is demonstrated PM skills. Maybe it's communication, verbal, written, maybe it's stakeholder management, maybe it's strategy, maybe it's roadmap, maybe it's vision. It could be product management skills, like core skills. Do you have to unlock certain skills at certain levels? Probably. As you go up in levels, you're going to have to lead bigger and broader teams. You're going to have to deal with more complexity. So laying out a strategy, like a strategic focus over the next year or multiple years, is going to be more and more difficult. Or laying out a common vision and getting multiple teams aligned is going to be more difficult. Whereas, again, if you're starting out for a feature, laying out a vision or a strategy for a feature is much, much simpler. It can still be done. You can still demonstrate those skills, but it's much simpler depending on the level that you're actually operating on. Nonetheless, you should write out every skill that you found either internally or you've discussed with your manager is part of what the company thinks a high level or an L+1 PM would be operating in. For every one of these skills, you should have a self-assessment, and then you should have a manager's assessment, meaning that after you put this whole document together, you're going to go and review it with a manager and get their buy-in and get their sanity check on whether the elements that you put in there actually match the reality or their perception of it. Next to each skill and your self-assessment, the manager's assessment, you have to write out the gap, if one exists, between you and this L+1. And then you have to write out what the proof point is for that skill. For instance, you can't just write, I have excellent verbal and written communication at the level of talking with multiple stakeholders and multiple big groups of people. You need some way to demonstrate that. Yes, your manager's saying that they agree is a good start, but then showcasing some deck review or some email or a screenshot of a high-level team member congratulating you on the leverage of that skill. So it's some proof point for that element, because it's not enough for you to do a self-assessment, and it's often not even enough for your manager because they have a little bit of a common interest with you to actually get you promoted because you're on their team. So your manager is also not going to be as impartial as somebody that's not on your team. For the skills, you've got the gaps, you've got the proof points. Let's move on to the next thing, which is the artifacts. Your artifacts are your general representation of your work as a PM at that level. These might be your PRDs, your initial concept docs, they might be strategy docs, they might be alignment docs, they might be PR, executive project reviews, decisions, launches, announcements, brainstorming sessions, like working processes, effectively your work product. As a product manager, your work product are all of these things. And by and large, they're alignment tools. They're like written or verbal alignment tools of various types that you're going to be demonstrating. And those are the very tools, like I said, in those Google promo reviews, we would actually look at those decks. We would look at those PRDs and we would see, okay, is this represented? Is vision represented here? Is strategy represented here? Is anyone else contributing to this document? Are they aligned with this document? These are your artifacts. We don't only need them to exist, but we also need them to not be in their own vacuum. They need to be as part of communication with others. So other people need to have opined on them or approved them or called them out. These are going to be your artifacts. The next element is the advocate space. This is your cross-functional support group. Think of this as your big team of supporters. This should start from your manager, of course, your high-level product leaders and your high-level engineering leaders, your team leads. And then it goes into designers, support folks, researchers, data scientists, anyone else that you work with, especially higher level folks. Unfortunately, people that are below your level are not really considered in promo support. So you need significantly above your level or above your level. So in a common tech example, if you are a senior PM at Google L6, you really need your buy-in, your advocates to be at the L7 level to say, yes, this person did a great job with this skill, with this deliverable, with this scope, etc. So the way to think about these advocates is that you cannot come up with them when you're going up for promo. You have to do this, just like the rest of the stuff that we're discussing here, significantly in advance. You have to be proactive about it. So proactive about it that when a PCA member gets a new job and we start preparing for new job success, we will talk about it in the first couple of weeks right off the gate. Right after you start, we'll start to think, okay, what does promo look like? Let's start to put together our own internal promo doc and then share it with the manager and everything, because it takes a long time to build the advocate groups that you actually need in order to have the promo successfully pass. It starts with you mapping out your list of supporters. And when you, as a PM, start a new organization or a new level, new team, I will usually ask you to create a list of people. This is your POC, point of contact. And for a product manager, it might be a list of like 20, 30, 40, 50 people that you work with on a given day or like on a given week, kind of on a day-to-day basis. But there's only going to be 10 or 15 or 20 of these who are going to be your high-level potential advocates. And I need you to focus on them pretty early on, identify them early on, so that in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, they can be your advocates because they have seen your work, you have helped them somehow, and they can now be your advocates who can tip the scale in your favor and literally on those promo sessions provide feedback that we, the product team, will actually review during those promo calibration. We're going to see, okay, what did the Eng leads say? Okay, what did the UX leads say? The sales partners, marketing, and other folks. Data, what did they all say? The higher level, the better. This is your advocate list. Start this way in advance. It's also going to allow you to focus on your work. When you have your POC list really well understood and internalized, and you come back to it every week or so, you know that you should be investing your time working with the people that are on this list and also doing projects that can help you and the people on this list. Yes, this part is a little bit maybe political in nature. It sounds to you like it is, but this is just the reality. You need to help others. This is a bit of a team sport. They'll help you, you help them. Hopefully this is all in the service of the customers and the business. If it's not, I don't know what to tell you. We're trying to be realistic here and actually focus on getting you the promo. All right, so those are our advocates. Now let's talk a little bit about the detractors. Where do we get detractors from? Detractors can be either blind spots for us, because when we put together our POCs, we just missed some folks that are going to be in those promo reviews, or rather they will have provided their feedback in advance, or they can tip their hand on the scale the other way. After the promo review process goes, they can just raise a flag and say, you know what? This person didn't follow up on this thing, and they worked with my team, and they said that they had a bad experience from a skill perspective, from an outcome perspective. So what's the solution here? We actually have to know who is our list of characters. Who else is on this list? Maybe that's not on your advocate list, but as a senior level stakeholder, and we interacted with them in some way, or we overlapped with them somehow, and they don't necessarily have anything positive to say to us. So they could be blind spots. Like I said, we don't know what they're going to say, but we don't also know whether they're going to say anything negative, and they could. The only real way to ensure they say something positive is to know that they are your advocates right away, which is why most of the time, especially in top tech, I really recommend and honestly just push on the subject of getting unanimous support. At places like Google, if you ask your 12 cross-functional leads what they think about the promo, if you're ready for promo, and one of them says, I'm not so sure, that's enough to put a huge slowdown on the process or possibly stop the promo entirely. Think about that. Out of 12, you have one person that says, I don't know, and the whole thing grinds to a halt, which is the same as the process is for actually getting into these companies via interviews. You have a ton of positive feedback, but you cannot move forward because of one negative feedback, because you need the support to be unanimous in places like Google than Facebook in a lot of ways. One aspect that gets reviewed when you're going up for promo is your impact. As a product manager, you're evaluated for the impact that you have on the customers and fundamentally the impact that you have on the business. And a lot of times, yes, that's revenue, that's cost, that's profitability, that's growth. It's meaningful business metrics. So your job as a PM is always try to be in the revenue part of the business, or at least in the profitability part of the business, or at least in some way to support those revenue drivers. Because otherwise it's going to be very, very difficult, if not impossible, for you to demonstrate impact. Case in point, I used to work in trust and safety for a big tech company, and it was very difficult to evaluate impact because you are assessed on certain things not happening, certain negative things not happening, for instance, which is a bizarre thing to evaluate. So had I known this in advance about the impact piece, I would have understood that this is probably not a good direction to go into. Am I saying you should never work in trust and safety? No, I'm not saying that, but you should know what you're getting into, know the unique challenges. This is another reason why PCA is so important as a partner for very proactive and high ambition product managers, because you need to know what you just don't know, what you don't anticipate. On the impact side of things, you just need to be able to explain and show what the impact was on the customer experience, which hopefully led to an impact on the revenue, which is on the business side. Pretty much any promo discussion is ultimately going to center on this impact. If you don't have the impact, because impact is supposed to increase as you go up level, if you just don't have it, then the promo kind of doesn't continue, just right there. So make sure you understand what the impact of your work is or will be if you're doing this proactively, hopefully, and then you're planning in advance. Okay, if everything goes right, what will I have delivered? You have to know what you're getting into. Why are you working on this project? What is it going to deliver for the business, for the customer, and for you, your career, from the perspective of the promo? When we're talking about these advocates and detractors, it's also important to understand the concept of visibility. Visibility is something you're going to need to work on constantly if you are proactively trying to go up for promo. Visibility means that certainly the people that are important in your list of POCs, your future advocates, who are hopefully the majority of your leads, they know what's happening. You keep them up to date. You've got updated docs, roadmaps. You are sending out launch emails. You're sending out weekly updates. You're keeping them short and brief. No one should be confused or like close your email because it's too dense and confusing. They should look forward to those, and you should look to spread the message of everything that you and your team are doing gently, but with a constant drumbeat. Every week if you can, every 2 weeks if you can't, every 3 if you can't maintain that. But it should be consistent, and you are slowly trying to bring in more and more people into your orbit to keep them up to date with what's happening. Hey, we had the launch. We're on track. We got this impact. Here's the result. Use it also to throw out some love to your team. And the more love to your team you throw out, the more people will add other people to the email thread, and it's going to take on a life of its own. So this visibility element is one of the most important things to nail early and continuously throughout, let's say, the 6-month promo readiness cycle. You don't want to just start at the very end. Oh, by the way, here's what happened, because that's not how word of mouth travels inside a company. It takes a long time repeating something over and over and over in order for people to actually get what's going on. One of the techniques that I use is this congratulations and thanking team members, which will encourage them to spread it far and wide. Another tactic is including broad cross-functional leaders who may not know exactly what you're working on, but they'd like to know what their team is contributing to. And by showing, hey, here's what the impact of this was, or here's what the impact is going to be, or here's how we're on track to deliver this awesome thing, you're telling those cross-functional team leaders that they've allocated resources correctly. So this visibility thing, super, super important. Of course, it goes hand in hand with all the other stuff that we've been talking about. You kind of can't have one without the other. This is what it takes to have a successful promo. You have to prepare for it in advance. You have to hit all of these things. And then your promo is basically inevitable, as opposed to the alternative, which is if you don't do any of these things, then you're gambling. Yeah, you could get lucky, but you could just as easily fail the promo, and it would be the correct move from the company's perspective because you didn't check all the boxes, and they want to be sure that they're going to retain you and you're going to do well on the next level. And the last thing I'm going to say about this is this whole package, everything we've been talking about, you should own it, but it should live in a standalone doc, the promo readiness doc for you. And you should let your manager know as soon as possible, hey, I have this doc. I'd like to focus on growth. I want to get to the next level. Here's how I imagine it. Here's how I think about the rubric. Here's how I think about the scope. Here's how I think about my impact. Here's the skill set, the attributes that I want to demonstrate. Here's my cross-functional group of advocates that I assume I'm going to build. What do you think? So you've done a ton of the work for your manager. Managers do not like to do this. They do not like to help their team grow their career because of how much work is required to make it happen. But if you own it, and if you do all of the work and you say, is this accurate? What do you think? What do you think about my self-assessment? What do you think my assessment is in all of these attributes, skills, impact, scope, and cross-functional alignment? And a lot of times you're going to catch your manager by surprise because they have not thought about it. Frankly, they probably do not do a quantitative assessment of your performance. And they certainly don't know what exactly it's going to take to get to the next level. They're just used to doing vague promises. Oh, if you just keep on delivering, you're just really good. I mean, you're really delivering very quickly here. And you're really onboarding rapidly, a lot faster than I'd like. Listen to how they talk. If you don't hear specificity in the things that they're talking about, you're not going to make it for promo. You're just not going to make it because they can be super vague in these conversations. And then when it comes time to the promo committee, the question is like, what exactly was the impact? And then they're going to say, oh, this person delivered 50 million in ARR. Okay, what about this person? To be honest with you, I don't know. That's what they're going to say. Okay, well, then they're not going to get the promo. Do you understand what's happening here? Vague conversations with your manager are the norm, but you cannot expect that that is going to lead to an actual promo conversation in 6 months. It's just not going to happen. So you're going to need to gently push back on it with your manager and say, hey, here's how I'm thinking of evaluating it from a quantitative perspective. What do you think? Am I off base? You're not saying this is the exact right approach. You're saying, here's how I'm thinking about it. And you use all the elements from this video that we've been discussing. You title it Promo Doc, put the date, and then bring it up for a discussion with your manager. You can even give them a read for your next one-on-one agenda. Probably you have some sort of a career one-on-one scheduled, and if not, you should definitely have at least a monthly one-on-one career chat with your manager. Usually for those chats, the managers are not really going to prepare. They're going to do some vague non sequiturs to you and just tell you you're doing a great job. But that's not specific enough. You're going to come in, you're going to send them a pre-read. Here's the promo readiness doc. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. And they're going to be shocked, most likely, because nobody does this, especially out of nowhere. But that's okay. You're going to walk them through it. You're not saying, hey, I must get a promo now. You're saying, I'm the type of product manager that wants to have significant impact and wants to grow in scope, responsibilities, and level of impact out there. If any of the concepts were not clear, or if you have additional questions, let me know down in the comments. Of course, if you are a PM who is looking for your next job, your next PM role in top tech or startups, or if you want our help to help you succeed on the job, then feel free to schedule a call with our team, PCA, using the link in the description. Otherwise, thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next time.